Hey, I was gonna. What? Oh, hey, what's up? Uh, what exactly are you doing? Oh, I'm just getting ready for Thrawn's live action appearance in Ahsoka. Uh huh. Well, that explains the blue, but what about the wigs? Oh, because Thrawn is the heir of the Empire. The the heir to the Empire? Yes, exactly. I'm just seeing which one looks best. How's this one look? No, 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 no. You know Thrawn is known as the heir to the Empire, right? That's exactly what I just told you. Heir of the Empire. No, heir. Yes, heir. Heir, as in like an heir of a kingdom. Dude, we're saying the exact same thing. No, you're saying hair as in like the hair on your head. I'm saying heir as in like a heir of a... You literally just said the same word that I did. Well, you kind of look ridiculous. So, but no, now what are you doing? Because I'm not even going to start. Alright, get all that stuff off. Welcome in, true believers, to the very first episode of the Antihero Comics Club. I hope you survived the experience. My name is Avery, and my less handsome, less humorous alternative persona is Antihero Comics. And this is my club, where all things comics can and will be discussed. So this club is going to cover all topics about comics, from events, runs, single issues, to writers and artists, even to the connections and speculation to the movies that we all know and love. And I'm going to try to convey this information as concise, educational, informational, all the above, etc., as possible. I have two other series that I launched with the channel. Antihero's Bar with No Name, where I make original cocktails based on comic book characters, and Only Mando, where you will follow me along on my journey of creating my very first Mandalorian armor cosplay. So feel free to check those out on the channel as well as this if you have some free time or you just want to see some more nerdy, comic booky, Star Warsy content. So let's jump right into it. For the very first meeting of the club, we are going to go over Star Wars' most intelligent, most cunning, most strategic character in pretty much all of its lore. That character's name is Glup Shido. Only kidding, only kidding. We're actually going to be talking about Mithra Naruto. I think I'm saying his name right. I'm not entirely sure. But the masses know him as Grand Admiral Thrawn of the Chiss Ascendancy and the Galactic Empire. Thrawn is actually one of the more superior characters in all of Star Wars lore, from the novels, the comics, the shows, the animated shows, and soon to be live action if they don't mess it up. And he's been very similarly portrayed across all those mediums. And so, fingers crossed. We would first be introduced to Thrawn in the novels, actually, with Timothy Zahn's breakthrough novel, Heir to the Empire, in 1991, which came at a really critical time for Star Wars because it was pretty much going through a dry spell, and this was like a renaissance to it because we hadn't gotten anything Star Wars since Return of the Jedi in 83, so it's been like over 8 years at this point, and we weren't getting anything. And then publishing houses started picking up Star Wars novels, and Heir to the Empire was its first real big success, and it was like a grand slam. So the original Thrawn trilogy, because it wasn't just released as Heir to the Empire, it was released as a trilogy by Timothy Zahn, would include Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, and then The Last Command, lastly in the trilogy. And these books would introduce like a plethora of characters, like very complex, very complicated characters that would go on to be in their own stories and make cameos in other stories down the line in Dark Horse Comics and in other novels, such as Joris Chabath, I think you say his name. It's very complicated, a lot of apostrophes. And Mara Jade, the wife of Luke Skywalker in Legends.
The creator of Mara Jade.
Wait! I am not the creator of Mara Jade, and I want you to get out of this office right now.
And even Gilead Pelion, who we actually just saw, and most recently in the penultimate episode of the last season of Mandalorian that we just got. He was a hologram, and he was like his loyal companion. And we saw that, a little bit of that, in the episode as well. So I actually prefer the work that followed that Heir of the Empire trilogy, and it would also be written by Timothy Zahn. It was the Hand of Thrawn duology, and it would kind of flesh out these characters like Mara Jade and Luke's relationship a lot more. And it really made a return of Thrawn to his like masterful glory as a militaristic strategist. The 2 books included in the duology were Spectre of the Past and Vision of the Future, and I just feel like they really just expanded upon Thrawn's military mind and his cunningness, and it didn't really talk about so much of his backstory as a Chiss warrior. It spent a lot of time focusing on his strategies and how he would prepare to go into battle and understand the enemy. Now, with all that being said, the novels really laid the groundwork for Thrawn, but he really wouldn't become popularized until the greatest animated television show of all time to some, and to me, I really enjoyed it, was Star Wars Rebels in Season 3, where we see Thrawn come into the fold through Dave Filoni's vision. I'm pretty sure he worked with Timothy Zahn on this vision because he was very, very similar to the novels, although more adapted to a kid's television show. So the 3rd season of Rebels hits, and we finally get this mature Ghost crew, which includes Ezra and Kanan and Sabine, Hera, Zeb, Chopper, all these people, and they finally developed as a team until they encounter their biggest threat yet, which happens to be Grand Admiral Thrawn. He just comes into the fold and he ruins all their very rebellious little plans, because that's what Thrawn do. That's what Mithran Naruto do. With Rebels, the mainstream audience finally got a taste of Legends, essentially, because the mouse came in, bought them all up, made all those novels and comic books from Dark Horse and all those publishing houses pretty much not canon and not part of the canonical timeline, and they made them Legends. So this was our first introduction into a Legends character coming over into the canon timeline. Even though it was adapted for a television show for kids, you can tell that Dave Filoni really worked with Zahn's original material because he was still the military strategist that we came to know and love from the novels. And it was really enjoyable to see this art of war mentality that he had, because that's what Thrawn does. He studies the art of his enemies, the culture of his enemies, in order to understand their weaknesses. It helps to combat his enemies on a militaristic and political level. So right after Rebels Season 3 hits and we get to see Thrawn in a visual medium, Zahn goes knocking on the publishing doors houses again, and he starts writing more and more about Thrawn, a lot more about his backstory and how he rose through the ranks to become the Grand Admiral, because he didn't just start as the Grand Admiral. So he would go on to write 2 more trilogies. The very first one kind of follows his ranks directly up to Grand Admiral rank, and it kind of follows the story after Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. And the second trilogy that he wrote very recently, in the 2020s, 2020, 2021, 2022, I even think, he wrote the last one. It really delves into his time before the Galactic Empire, when he was more so part of the Chiss Ascendancy, which is where his species comes from. All of this stuff takes place in between Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, and Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, because when we see him in all his glory, it's really at the end of Revenge of the Sith, when Darth Vader and Palpatine are running the show. A nice quick read that I actually think fills you in pretty good and pretty quickly about the origins of Thrawn and how he rose up to the ranks and eventually became the Grand Admiral, and his relationship with good old Emperor Palps. Is actually the Marvel Comics run. It's only a 6-issue run. Floppies are kind of expensive, but it's written by Jody Houser, and I think it's great. The art is great. The writing is actually really great and concise, and it kind of summarizes a lot of the second to last trilogy that he just wrote, because it really talks about him being founded on an exiled planet and then demanding essentially to become an officer for the Galactic Empire because he wants to benefit his ascendancy as a Chiss, and this is how he does it. He forms an alliance with the Empire. Little do they know that he's essentially just using them because he recognizes that they are the premier power in the galaxy and he can help them protect his species the most. I believe they are actually reprinting this run, the 6-issue run, in a trade paperback form. It's a collected edition, so it collects all 6 issues. So I recommend trying to look for that. Go pick it up. I think it might be on pre-order. I know the original one is a little more expensive because out of print, trade paperbacks always go for a little bit more. But if you can't find the floppies, if you're not a floppy kind of guy like me, then go out and get the trade paperback and give it a read. Or if you have Marvel Unlimited, I believe it is online as well. And that kind of covers the history of Thrawn as a character and his personality and how he operates and what makes him tick and stuff like that. If you really want to go in depth, read the novels. The novels cover all the battles he's won, all the battles he's fought, all his alliances, and his people that he's partnered up with. people that he's taken advantage of, people that have tried to take advantage of him. There's a lot of great resources on YouTube as well, on channels like Eckhart's Ladder. He goes over the battles and like he actually draws them out, and they're really fascinating, and how he like conquered battles with only using one ship because he understood their culture and understood how their battle tactics were. And he goes over in depth all of those, so I recommend checking his channel out. But he's a very complicated, very fleshed out character in Star Wars. A lot of characters don't get a lot of backstory, but I think he's actually one of the most prominent characters in Star Wars. I truly believe that he can pretty much defeat any opposition as long as it's a fair battle. And there's just something so fascinating about that idea of a character, that he's almost unbeatable, not by strength, but by intelligence, because you don't see that as often as you should in mediums and movies and shows and stuff like that. But he does it through like studying their culture and their art, and he understands this and he respects it, and because he respects it, he can display like the weaknesses of his enemies, and it really just allows him to capitalize on all of that. So all in all, I think in a fair fight, Thrawn always prevails, and that's pretty cool. So speaking about his upcoming appearance in the live action Ahsoka show, we could see whatever. I don't know what Thrawn we're going to see. We could see the anti-hero Thrawn, because we don't know what he was up to at the end of Rebels Season 5, the end of the finale of Rebels. We don't know what he was doing with Ezra. We don't know how he's going to come back. He could be like an anti-hero and kind of play both sides and just be looking out for himself. Or we could see him as the pure villain for the Galactic Empire. He could even fill in all the plot holes that lead into the sequel trilogy. Or maybe they're just going in a totally new direction. I don't know if Dave Filoni is going to do this, because I don't think the fans are really clamoring for it as much as a lot of other people think they are, but we could see some like long lost villains of Legends that he's fought against, such as like the Yuuzhan Vong. I know a lot of people hate the Yuuzhan Vong just because they're just such a weird, unstoppable force. But the Grisk have kind of come into play in the canon novels and stuff like that. So, and they kind of seem like they replaced the Yuuzhan Vong in a sense as an adversary to Thrawn. So we could see the Grisk, we could see Yuuzhan Vong, we could see something brand new. I feel like there has to be like a supplementary threat to Thrawn, rather than just like Rebels and Mandalorian and whatever fighting him. I think it needs to be like a three-way battle, because Thrawn's at his best when he is complex and he is calculating and cunning and all that stuff. I am stoked to see Lars Mikkelsen return. He was the voice actor, the original voice actor in Rebels for Thrawn, and he's returning to live action. We'll get to see some of that James Cameron special makeup prosthetic on him and see how that works out for him. I'm excited. He looked really good in the trailer. The back of his head at least did. I'm excited, and I think you should be too. Star Wars is at its best when the writing is good and we have complex villains. They challenge us. We don't know whether we should root for them or not. Star Wars just provides some of the best villains of all time. Darth Vader is probably the most iconic villain of all time. Palpatine's right up there. Kylo Ren was great, even though a lot of people have problems with the story written around him, but he was still a great character. So I believe in the future of the franchise, and I'm excited to see it all. I'm excited to see Thrawn. I'm a big fan of Thrawn. I've always been a big fan of Thrawn. Some of the earliest reads of my life were Heir of the Empire, but there are also plenty of other Legends books that we can get into in a future Antihero Comics Club. So with all that being said, if you have any suggestions on events, comics, single issues, characters, artists, writers, I don't know, anything, you can talk about anything on the Antihero Comics Club. Comment it down below. Let me know what you want to see, and I'll talk about it. And maybe I'll learn something, and hopefully you learn something, and hopefully you continue to learn something. And you should always love yourselves, love your friends and family, and love comic books, because they are really that great. So this has been another episode of the Antihero Comics Club. I hope you survived the experience. My name is Avery, Antihero Comics.